Hello and welcome to We Got Issues, the comic book podcast that asks the hard questions, namely, who has the best butt in comic books? Answer, Dick Grayson. Sorry, Matt Murdock, get the hell out of here. I'm Brian Compton, aka BComp, and joining me always is Josh Markwith, the Raj Al Ghul to my Lex Luthor. It is Raj, or do you go with Raj?
So I've always been Raz Al Ghul, and then when I saw an interview and I looked it up, it's Raish, and it hurt my heart so much.
Oh no!
Because I was one of those like it's like a GIF or GIF type of thing for me.
Yes, it's GIF. I don't care.
Exactly. See,
I know what you're saying. I'm still calling it GIF. I don't care.
No, and I'm with you. I'm gonna call it a GIF. Even where the creator said it's GIF.
Yeah,
but,
it's GIF.
He's a computer person.
I'm gonna buy you a bunch of Christmas GIFs.
Yeah, exactly. It's so, but then and then the guy who created it is Raish, and I was like, why?
Nah.
Why, bro? Why do you have to do this to me? Thank you for the introduction, Brian. Thanks so much. And poor Matt Murdock, I guess he did not see that coming.
Oh.
What? Is it because Daredevil is blind? Yes. Did I just explain the joke?
Oh, yes. I got it. I got the joke.
Okay.
It's very good. It's very clever.
Oh, goodness. Oh, sorry. I'm just taking this. My side hurts so much because of how funny and hysterical I am. And I'm just waiting. Let's just wait for all the other people just to laugh.
I did warn people this is a show full of dad jokes.
See, that's very true. So you've been warned, and there's going to be many more to come. But again, thanks for the introduction. And this week, we are going to be talking about a certain trailer that came out a couple weeks ago, specifically the Superman trailer that dropped. And we've had a few people have asked, like you specifically have had a few people have asked you about like the source material and just what are they going to be going with the Superman, because Superman has been through a lot of movie stuff. So it's just everybody's kind of asking like what Superman are we going to get?
Well, he's also like the oldest superhero. You know, he's been around
very much
for 80 plus years. So
he's
a lot of source material to pull from.
Yeah, and he's the first superhero, right? Like if I read that correct, yeah. So with that though, we thought one of the best things to cover this week is one of the main inspirations. What we're hearing about is one of the main inspirations, because not a lot of people know a lot about the movie right now yet, but it's All-Star Superman, which is a great book, a great Superman book. So really, we're going to be talking about the story and what we feel about it.
Here's the question, and this is the question I think that is for the podcast. Is it required reading for the new movie? That's the question. Is it? Because if you're a newcomer who's never read a Superman book, do you start off with All-Star Superman? And I think it's going to be an interesting discussion. But before we can even answer that question, it's sponsor time. Can we tackle this one?
Yeah, let's see if I can try to do this. I don't know if I can do it as good as you've been doing in the last couple of weeks, but here we go. Sponsor, Clear Throat.
Leave that in.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah, it's part of the amuse-bouche of this sponsorship. Now, are you on the lookout for something a little more weird than your run-of-the-mill snacks? Then you need to do yourself a favor and check out Duff and Shaw Snacks. From sour cherry Mothman eggs to forbidden sour gummies, Duff and Shaw's snacks and candy are curated from the most mysterious and undiscovered places on planet Earth, uncovering flavors that will give you stories to tell your grandchildren. Now go to duffandshaw.com/issues today and check out all they've got and more. Again, that's duffandshaw.com/issues to help us out. And please see all the different snacks and all the candy that you can get.
That was brilliant. Thank you.
No, thank you. Again, I think we have to clap every time we do like a sponsorship read.
Yeah.
So it's just for our own type of thing too. But as you know, as we mentioned earlier, the Superman trailer dropped just a couple weeks ago. And Brian, what are your kind of thoughts and like first reactions from it?
You know, I'm not sure if we discussed it too much, but I don't want to say I had low expectations for the trailer. I try not to get excited about this stuff anymore, fanboy out about a lot of the stuff. I got to say, man, it hit me right in the feels. when Crypto comes running out and just grabs Superman, I just was like, okay, all right, you got me in the dad movement. You got that dad moment out of me. You know what I mean? Like I was like, all right, you got me on board. You got me, James Gunn.
Hey, you told me, yeah, when you got teared up with the Crypto, my first response was it because of the whole dad moment? And you're like, that's totally what it was. You got me in the dad feels. And
Yeah, I do think it's funny. They're saying that this is not a world building movie or not a world. It's not a setup movie. I'm like, are you sure? Because I counted about like
yeah,
30 heroes in this movie. I'm like,
bunch
what?
of Easter eggs and stuff. And then
Yeah.
but also, Brian, like, kind of, this is an interesting question for you. Is just, you are used to seeing it as an analytical piece, like,
Yeah.
when you worked with Nerdist and with
G4, all
G4 and
that.
stuff, you're looking for all the stories and Easter. How's it been watching trailers like this for now a fun perspective?
It's been absolutely great. Like, the Deadpool trailer that dropped. I didn't even watch that until like a month after it had been out. I was like, yeah, I'll get to it when I get to it. It's just 'cause, like, it's nice to not have to analyze everything and literally break down frame by frame by frame. Like, oh, do you see this shot here? Well, that's a reference to Guy Gardner when blah blah blah. Oh, do you see this reference over here? That's a reference to this storyline. Oh, that it's like having to explain everyone's back. It just takes the fun out of it. So it's nice to just watch things as a fan. It's not to say that, like, I don't, like I said, I try not to fanboy out, but I did. What about you, man?
I love the trailer. It's a good teaser, which is what
Mhm.
it is, very much a teaser. Only
Mhm.
what one word of dialogue is throughout the whole thing, which
Mhm.
is him telling Crypto to take him home. But there's a lot of different shots and different things that kind of look interesting. All the Justice League members that are coming up, and it's a
Mhm.
different type of Justice League. It's more JLI than JLA, so which is
Mhm.
great.
I'm fine with that.
Um,
I love the
yeah, no,
JLI.
it's very James Gunn. And like
Yep.
when he did the Suicide Squad, he did not what our typical Suicide Squad is. So
Mhm.
it's very interesting to see where they go with this and what kind of Superman we're going to get. That's my only thing. Superman needs to be somebody who's for hope, the nice guy on steroids.
Well, that all said, can you give us the blurb on the back?
Totally. Combining their singular talents to create a new and brilliant vision of the Man of Steel, legendary comic storytellers Grant Morrison and Frank Quitely are reunited with their We Three collaborator Jamie Grant for one of the greatest Superman stories ever imagined.
Yeah, obviously it's a little bit more than that, but this is
Yeah,
a
again, there's the blurb
the
on the
blurb
back
on the
just to get
back.
it. I mean, honestly, when I was trying to get the blurb on the back as well, because I have my hard copy stashed
Mhm.
somewhere, and I was
Mhm.
just, I'm gonna be real with you folks. And Brian, I was way too lazy to try to find that, so I went to researched on
Yep.
online, and most of the blurb on the back are quotes of
Yep.
people
That's the one
praising it. So
that's the literally one I have. Is the praise plus the one you just gave me. I
yeah,
mean, just for you all, what you all know, this is basically a 12-issue miniseries that was published back in November of 2005. It ran until about 2008. It focuses on a Silver Age version of Superman. When I say Silver Age, I don't mean like, from the 60s. I just mean like it's that vibe of the Silver Age Superman from the 60s, who is basically dying after getting his blood cells supercharged by solar energy. And the 12 issues are then about him going through his life and like, what do I have to do to save the world before I go? To your point, Josh, it's a vibe. It's about feeling.
Mhm.
It's about character. There's a lot of zaniness that happens in this, but I digress.
Yeah, and it's a zaniness, but also the combination of uh, Frank's art and the colors and everything that they do, the wacky colors with Grant and Morrison's mind, which they're pretty out there. You and I have a discussion about Grant Morrison all the time. Grant Morrison is amazing when he has an editor or somebody that can rein him in,
Yeah,
or an artist that can really
understand him.
understand him and depict. And I think Frank and Grant are a really good combination who've worked well, specifically on this book.
Mhm.
And I liked how self-contained this one is.
Mhm.
It's a 12-story miniseries. Each issue is its own self-contained story,
Mhm.
which is great. With a couple two-parter ones, but mainly it's a story and issue, which is great. With
Mhm.
especially the stories that are being told. And like
Yeah.
you said, he's doing what he can before he dies, but they specifically kind of say, it's like his last labors. It's 12
It's the 12
labors
labors of
before.
Superman, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, the 12 feats of Superman, I think is what they describe it as.
Mhm.
As I said before, this is not going to be the movie of the Superman, or was previously, I think it was called Superman Legacy or whatever. The James Gunn
Yep.
movie will not be an adaptation of this. I think what they are trying to channel, and this is why I say it takes inspiration from this, is the vibes of the book. Like you said, Superman is at his purest in this book. He is a good, earnest, wants to save the world as best he can before he goes. And I'm not saying like he's going to die at the end of Superman, because that would be dumb, but it is that sort of energy he's going to put forth, I mean, we've already seen an adaptation of this. They did the animated film, I believe, right?
Yeah, they did the animated film, and I don't know if you haven't seen it, right?
Mm.
And
I'm really bad. I hate to say I'm really bad with like a lot of the animated
Yeah.
stuff. I'm gonna be honest.
I'm gonna be honest, this is not something that you really need to watch, only because Frank Quitely's art doesn't really. They try to adapt it, and it's one of those movies where it didn't really adapt well for animation. And also, they try to do these 12 stories into one animated movie, which was really tough. Like if it was more of a mini series, I think that would have been a lot better, because they could flesh out stuff or just be a little bit more crazy and more true to what they were trying to do. But they try to cram all these different stories, and they skipped a lot of them into this one book. So, or book, excuse me, one movie, not one book.
Yeah, I get you.
This was one movie. So it's just hard to. It was just hard to adapt. So they tried to adapt like Michael Turner's art for Superman, Batman, Apocalypse to the animated film, and that didn't really kind of
Translate
well, crossover well. But the Ed McGuinness art that they adapted that for the Public Enemies, that translated really well. So it
that's
just
because
depends on the artist.
Yeah, well, Ed McGuinness art lends itself towards the animated style. You know
Totally.
what I mean? Yeah, one thing I will say that, and we'll discuss this in specificity as we get a little bit further into this episode, but I do think we will see certain sequences from this book adapted into the movie. One specifically, I think, is the actual introduction of the book. For those of you who've not read it, it has one of the most like brilliant versions of Superman's origin. It's essentially literally the first page is just 4 panels with 8 words, and that's it. That's because Grant Morrison's like justification for it was like, we don't need to see Superman's origin. We've seen it a million times. We know exactly what it is. And quite simply, I'm going to just read it real quick. But we see a planet, Krypton, basically on the verge of death, and it's just this doomed planet. You then see a panel of 2 parents, presumably Jor-El and Lara, with the caption, "Desperate Scientists." You see Superman's rocket flying through space saying, "Last Hope." You see the Kents presumably pulling back his cape, and when he was in his little blanket saying, "Kindly couple." Everyone knows Superman's origin at this point. We all know he was an orphan from a doomed planet that was sent to Earth and raised by the Kens. It's the same thing with like the Spider-Man movies. We've seen the Spider-Man origin so much at this point. We all know is Peter Parker was bitten by a radioactive spider, his Uncle Ben died, and he learned great power comes great responsibility. To the point where when they decided to do the new Spider-Man movie for the Marvel Cinematic Universe, they didn't even bother. They were like, we're not even, literally it was like, well, I had this uncle, I don't want to hear a kid. It's kind of like that kind of thing. And I think we're going to see something similar to this. So you probably will see his origin sequence play out over the opening credits. You know what I mean? Like, that's what I think we're going to see.
Yeah, and Batman's on that same boat as well, and that's for
absolutely.
the Batman they didn't have they started him, a year later. So I think it's what Batman, Spider-Man, and Superman. Everybody knows their origin. Everybody's seen their origin so many times that, like you said, we don't really need to go through. And then through those panels too that you were talking about, the art that Frank Quitely does is just so good. It's very vibrant. It's a great start to the book. You know what you're getting into, both succinctly and beautifully.
Well, speaking of Frank Quitely, let's get into the creative team. So as I mentioned earlier, it's Grant Morrison is the writer. If you don't know who they are, they were part of the British invasion of comic writers in the 80s, along with writers like Alan Moore and Neil Gaiman. He's a Scottish writer who's very prolific and very influential in comics. They're known for their unconventional stories and high concept ideas that can kind of be polarizing for a lot of newcomers and even longtime readers. Typically, their stories are a mix of counterculture and humanism, and just the plain weird. I mean, stuff gets weird. While they've written plenty of indie books and like UK books and as well as a few Marvel books like New X-Men, which will warrant its own discussion later, they're mostly known for their work at DC. Books like JLA, 52, Animal Man, Batman, Arkham Asylum, Doom Patrol, New 52 Superman, The Flash, Green Lantern, Seven Soldiers, The Invisibles, Wonder Woman. I mean, it's just like they have had their finger in almost every piece of the DC pie almost.
They've done a couple Crises as well.
Mm-hmm.
Final Crisis, yes.
I would argue that their stories are not only required reading, but they require rereading, if that makes any sense. You don't just read a Grant Morrison story and be like, that's it. It's like, no, it lends itself to being reread, to pick up all the details you missed. When Grant writes a story, when he starts at the beginning, they start at the beginning, they also start at the end, and so you need to read everything in between, and you need to reread it to really get all the nuances and layers. And that makes it very intimidating for old-time readers and especially newcomers. Grant Morrison's, knowledge of the DC universe is almost unparalleled. I mean, it's like up there with like people like Mark Waid who just read everything. And so they know all those little details. And real quick on that note, they do go by they, them, although they do accept he, him. I'm trying to honor what they want to go by, just so you know.
No,
but
totally.
that's Grant for you in a small nutshell.
Grant Morrison is one of those writers where if I'm going to go into a book, I have to really be prepared mentally.
Yeah.
And it depends on how I will like the book. If I have to have a compendium for a compendium just to understand what is going on in something, it's going to be over my head. And some of the times Grant can go over my head a lot because me read words and like pretty pictures.
It's funny you should mention, even like I was kind of going back to the rereading aspect of all of this. Like, I remember reading this book when it first came out, and I read it in singles and loved it at the time. But it was like one of those things where it was over a 2 to 3 year period that the whole book came out. Because Frank Wiley, as much as I love them, he's very slow, and he admits, yeah, I'm slow. That's the price you get for my detail. You know what I mean? Like, I'm gonna be slow. I do it all by hand. I don't use computer. You know what I mean? So that's the thing. But like, I remember at the time really rereading it recently. I was like less enthused with it. But then when I had to go back and read it recently for this podcast, and then I had to reread it again for the podcast so I was doing some extra notes. I'm like, everything I didn't like about it, then I'm like, oh, I caught it the second time around. I was like, oh no, that's what they were doing. Oh, and it's really, really weird within the read, the initial read, and then the reread of it. Like my interpretation and my love of it grew exponentially, if that makes any sense.
I understand that for sure. And when we talk about some of the moments too, we'll discuss just kind of things where I was kind of low on, but high on, and things like that. Because again, when something's over my head, I lose interest. I lose like the need to want to keep reading. So it gets in that kind of area a lot.
Well, speaking of reasons to keep reading this book, the artist. Do you want to tackle Frank Wiley?
Yeah, Frank Wiley he was born under the name Vincent Patrick Dagnan. They said that correctly. Thank you.
You did.
We've done our research this time on how to say names. I've heard from people, it's like, if you can't say their names, why aren't you doing the research before?
That's true.
So, and it's a
what
good
I yell at
note.
my producers about.
Yeah. So we actually did the research on the names that we're saying them correctly. So he's a frequent collaborator with Morrison. They've worked together on books like Flex Mentallo, New X-Men, Batman and Robin, JLA Earth 2, and as we mentioned, We 3 in that blurb in the back. It's known for hyper-specific detail, line work, along with scale and movement. These people are the polarizing Scots people. They're very polarizing, with some saying that his characters can be a little bit too ugly, which I think art is all in the eye of the beholder, and it's more, I appreciate it more because it's a little bit, it's not grit, it's like polished grittiness, if that makes sense. Like polished,
it's polished wrinkled, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
Quiley is one of those artists that I can see why people wouldn't like him. I absolutely love him, and he's one of those few artists that can like translate kinetic energy onto the panel. Like, there is movement in his panels. Like, that's the thing, is a comic book is a static image ultimately. It is one frame and that's it. and yet somehow he is able to evoke movement within that panel. The Batman and Robin book that the two of them did together, I swear to God, Robin is moving in those panels. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know how he does it. And like, I like it because you look at a Quietly panel, you know that's a Quietly panel. You know that's Quietly art. It stands out among everyone else. Right? And a lot of art gets kind of generic, and you can't differentiate like with any real specificity. I think you can with Quietly. You look at him, that's Quietly. Got it. Boom.
He reminds me, him and Tim Sale remind me of each other a little bit because of how they kind of have big heads, small faces. And then they both draw their Superman as more of a stockier, instead of like a for like football, like instead of like a quarterback or that kind of tight end
linebacker.
Yeah, he's a linebacker, which that's how they draw him a little bit more stockier, more beefier.
Yeah.
Than normal, and then the clothes are just beefy, or beefier, but also just a little bit looser, and that's they have that in common for like it's a lot like animated series Superman a little bit as well. So it's a beefy Superman compared to the Jim Lee Superman or the even my favorite Dan Morris Superman, but it's
well, it's true. They're two different art styles completely, two different Superman essentially. I do think it's interesting you brought up the Superman of it all with him. What's really great, and if you look at some of the behind the scenes material for this book, the way he draws Clark Kent as opposed to the way he draws Superman, he shows the curvature at the back, like what Superman's spine looks like, and it's like chest is up and out, and he's like chin forward, and then when he draws Superman or Clark, he draws that his spine curve like he's hunched over. You know what I mean? And I agree with you about the whole like him wearing the baggy clothes. Like, you're absolutely right. I didn't even catch that until you brought that up. I was like, I'm a bigger guy, you're a bigger guy. Man, we can't find clothes that fit us. They're either way too loose or they're way too tight. You know what I mean? They never fit properly. And it makes sense that Superman would have that kind of same aesthetic, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, his Clark Kent just reminds me. Clark Kent always looks like he's in a room he's always about to hit the ceiling. Like that's how he's hunched a little bit to me. And when he's drawing, so it's that uncomfortableness, and he's going out of his way to be that schlubby, uncomfortable, not nincompoop, but just the guy you would not see as Superman. I show this to a lot of people, like when people ask me how good Christopher Reeve was as Superman, you show him that reveal scene. Yeah, the reveal scene that he has with the Lois Lane in Superman.
He takes off his glasses.
Takes off not only just takes off his glass. It's the whole thing where he takes off his glasses, stands up straight, his voice changes, he gets his whole aura, his vibe, demeanor, just everything just changes. Where he's like, it's not more of like, oh okay, hello, someone is like, Lois, I mean, it's and it's the whole chain, and that's why a lot of people are like, how can nobody see Clark Kent and Superman with the glasses? It's so much more than that.
Yeah. It's funny. I absolutely do. If it's the scene you're talking about, it's in the Superman movie where literally he goes on Clark comes over for the date, and she has been smitten by Superman, who just like flew around the stars, and he's like, he sees how smitten she is, and he takes off his glasses like, Lois, there's something I have to tell you. And he looks through the glasses and realizes, I can't tell her right now, and he flops back down, puts the glasses back on. I was like, we're going to be late for the dinner if we don't get going right now.
Yeah.
I absolutely love that scene.
It's so, and then in the time that he actually does show her, I think it's in Superman 2. Is it Superman 2? Yeah, it's Superman 2.
Sure it's 2.
It's in the hotel room where they're at Niagara Falls. And he does that whole thing again, or he does the full transformation. Stands up, not only stands up straight, but just like he
broadens
Superman.
out. He gets bigger. He broadens out.
Yeah. So that's what Frank quietly does with his art. You wouldn't really notice the two are the same. A little bit. I mean, you can. It's it's whatever, but. There's enough differences that you can see why people are being duped.
Yes, absolutely. So that brings us to the origins of this actual comic itself. Specifically, why was it called All-Star? What the heck is All-Star? I'm going to kind of run through this and make this as quick as possible. But the whole All-Star line came out of like kind of like, I don't want to say it was a direct response to Marvel's success with the Ultimates line, but it's pretty close to it.
I would say it is. I think kind of say it is.
I don't know if it was ever officially that is what I'm trying to get at, but it's pretty clear. I mean, basically, one of the best and worst things about comics is the years and years of continuity. It obviously keeps longtime fans engaged, but it can be intimidating for new readers. I mean, it's why we get the questions we get asked all the time, like, where do I start? Where do I start? So the All-Star
line
sounds
like that to you?
A lot of people.
Who's talking to you like, where do I start?
It was Kermit the Frog. I was talking to Kermit the Frog the other day.
Is that the voice that's in your head of people when they talk to you?
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, like the All-Star line was an attempt, I think, to follow in the footsteps of the success of Marvel found with Ultimates. The idea was to let high caliber creators take on these iconic characters without having to worry about the baggage of continuity. You know, it's like as long as they're kind of like staying true to the core of the character, you're good to go. Tell these self-contained stories, and they were great. The only other book that was published, unfortunately, under the All-Star line was the infamous All-Star Batman and Robin by Frank Miller and Jim Lee, which on paper sounds like the perfect book.
Ironically, on paper it sounds like it, but then on paper it wasn't.
I'm the goddamn Batman.
Gosh. Yeah, and then masks on. And then
Yes.
and then beating Green Lantern with just a room of yellow. It was.
It's a to-do, baby. And there was a lot of other books like that were announced. Like I think Azzarello was going to do a book with Cliff Chang, and there's a few other ones that were kind of announced, and it all just kind of fell apart. The only thing that kind of like survived all this is the All-Star Superman. Although to be fair, there was All-Star Batman that came out a few years later by Scott Snyder, and I think Jock did that stuff. And then there was an All-Star Section 8, which is a spin-off of the Hitman crew, but I digress.
Goodness, yeah. When you don't even know about the spin-offs, it's pretty...
Well, I don't even think they
compare
were
it to Ultimates.
Well, it's the same place. Like at the end of the day, the only thing that came out of it was this. It is ironic that not ironic, but it's kind of on purpose that the thing All-Star landed with this because of how much it has to do with like stars and solar energy and the sun and everything like that in this book. I think it's a nice little like through line. But where did the origins of the story come from? That actually, you have to rewind the clock a little bit to around the year 1999-2000 when basically a new editor was coming on to take on the Superman books, and basically kind of like tangentially reached out to Mark Waid and Grant Morrison. Like, hey, I'm looking at bringing on a new crew. And Grant Morrison and Mark Waid were at Comic-Con, and there's a very famous picture of them with all these like Superman cosplayers. And Grant saw this one cosplayer just sitting on a bench wearing Superman, and Grant decided to interview the guy as Superman. And he said, like, the thing that always got me was the way he was just relaxed. He's like, that's how Superman would be. He wouldn't be tight and chest up and ready to go. He'd be just chill, relax. And that's what kind of it spawned the beginnings of this story, this sort of like human take on Superman. Unfortunately, that whole storyline fell apart due to some shenanigans over at DC. Won't get into all that, but
DC shenanigans? No way. Please. What? No way.
Well, but here's the thing. It's really interesting. Like, I'm going to move on to this quickly, but it was like, yeah, Mark Waid was excited to do it. Grant Morrison was excited to do it. They're going to have Mark Millar come on board. Tom Payer was going to come on board. And I guess their edict was, and this is, keep in mind, this is Mark Waid, Kingdom Come Mark Waid, and Grant Morrison, JLA Grant Morrison. So they're hot right now. You know what I mean? And DC is like, no, we don't put hot creators on Superman. Like, it's going to sell no matter what. So why would we waste money on hot creators on that book? We want them on the shit books that aren't doing anything. So no, what the and they it was like a whole to do, and they were like banished from DC from ever writing. It was like a whole thing. It's a story in and of itself, but for another time
or for all time. No. But with that, I mean, what came from that kind of what the out of the darkness came the light of this book, which is considered one of the best Superman stories of all time.
So what is it about this book for you, or what do you think it is in general that separates it from the herd? Like, and what does it make it stand out? Because like I said, this is a character that's been around for 80 plus years at this point. He's thousands of issues. Literally, Action Comics is over 1,000 issues, and that doesn't include Adventures of Superman, Superman, Man of Steel, Superman, Man of Tomorrow. He's been in JLA and World's Finest and, Superman, Batman, Superman. I mean, like, the dude is everywhere. He's got literally thousands of issues. Why does this miniseries, do you think, separate itself from the herd?
Yeah, that's the tough question, because I think everybody likes Superman when Superman is done right, and
Yes.
there's been times when Superman has been wrong. So it's
Man of Steel.
great. Yeah, that's it's
No disrespect to Cavill. I like Henry Cavill.
Henry Cavill is to the Superman as Eric Bana is to the Hulk. Great casting, great acting. Tried as hell to make the movie work. It just didn't work out. The actor, the director, and just the story just did not work out.
Well, that's the thing, is like, ultimately at the end of the day, when Pa Kent says, well, hey, it's like, hey, there's a bus full of kids. Do I just let them drown? And Pa Kent's like, yeah, you should let them drown. It's like, no, you got the character wrong then. And this is a book that gets the character right.
Yes, when Superman should be this ray of hope and should be this uplifting type of character. It's the antithesis, not the antithesis, but just the opposite of Batman. It's why they work so well together when they're in books together. And what makes this story really well is it's a certain aspect of Superman done really right. Like you said, there's so many different issues of Superman, because from the very beginning of superheroes, so you have different types of Superman stories. You have him being more of a journalist type of story. You have him more of the lack of a better word, superhero stories. And you have a lot of these scientific Superman stories where you delve into more of like, hey, yeah, that's right. His parents were scientists in a technologically advanced type of planet. So of course he'd be pretty smart when you allow him to be. And he's very strong. He has a lot of muscles. And what's the biggest muscle in the body? The brain.
Well, it's absolutely true, because, well, yeah, we can get into it. Let's just start breaking it down. But
it just and this is a scientific Superman story, and that's done super well.
And it is that point right there that you're making right there. When you say science, that's exactly it. Like I said, this is a throwback to the Silver Age, and I've talked about this before with you. Like, the Silver Age is science heroes. You know what I mean? The Golden Age was about magic and mysticism and weirdness and horror comics and all that. And then the Silver Age, they had the Comic Code Authority, and they had to be like, we can't do any of that stuff. So everything is based in science, or a reaction to the Cold War. So all these, and so this is what that is science.
Yeah, I mean, and when we were discussing it too, you had a great example of just the characters of just, let's say, Green Lantern right away. Like with DC, that how is that? So like DC, the Golden Age was more.
The Golden Age is our magic and mysticism. That's why the original Green Lantern, Alan Scott, his Green Lantern ring is a magic ring. It's a magic ring. Then you get into the 60s, and that's the Silver Age. And Green Lantern now is a science core. It's aliens come down, and they've got this science ring, or this space ring that is powered by science and all that. Then it's like kind of funny. Like, I didn't realize until we're discussing, but like in the 70s, you then have like the Bronze Age, and that's where it's like more social issues and stuff to that effect. And so lo and behold, who do we have? We have John Stewart. Yeah. Taking on racial politics, basically, and racial issues and stuff like that, racial identity. Then you go into the 90s, where we're hitting the modern age, when everything's dark and grim and gritty and adult. And guess who takes over as Green Lantern then? It's Kyle Rayner at that point. Kyle Rayner is a reaction to Hal Jordan going apeshit and killing all the Green Lanterns. You know what I mean? So, this book is a throw to the Silver Age, where everything is science-based. It's, the fears of the Cold War are out. So everything is like based on that hard science, not hard science, but like that weird science, like the nuclear energy and all that kind of stuff.
Silver Age seems to be where a lot of writers and artists kind of go back to a lot as well. Because I think it's like what they were reading as kids. So it got them into comics. Doesn't Mark Waid kind of goes into the silver? He's a big Silver Age guy. Like when I talked to him for a little bit, when he was at a local comic book store, and I was a dork in front of him.
I did the same thing when I interviewed him, so don't feel bad. I interviewed him, but I had him on one of my shows.
Yeah, and I kind of asked him just like what does he like to write mostly, and what draws him to these characters. And he's more of a science guy. Like that's why the Shazam was a little bit different. His Shazam was a little bit different. It's just he's more of the science based or what he delves into. So it's definitely like the Silver Age type of stuff. Just Kingdom Come and just all these different stories that we can see from Morrison or Millar or Alan Moore. That's all science stuff. So it's all these great writers, modern writers, are pulling from the Silver Age.
You brought up Batman earlier and the comparison between Superman and Batman, and no, I'm not. We brought up Tom King several times, over the course of these episodes, and he's very polarizing as well. He's one of those writers that either you like or you don't. But there is one issue that I really particularly like by him. It's where Lois and Clark are on a double date with Catwoman and Bat, and there's a great sequence where Superman is explaining to Lois, like, don't you get it? Like, kids see Batman and they want to be him. I can't compete with that. And you see the alternate one where Batman's talking to Catwoman. He says, don't you get it? Like, kids look at Superman and they look up to him. I can't compete with that. And it's funny how they see each other. And it's like, yeah, it's like kids want to be Batman, but they want to look up to Superman. He's an inspiration for everyone.
Yeah, Jeff Loeb has a lot of stuff like that too in his Superman, Batman, Public Enemies. A lot of just Batman kind of looking up to him. He's just like this is a guy who could pretty much destroy the world, but it's compassion and just how he is what saved us, or what saves us all the time. Like he could rain fire from the sky, and then Superman is just like, this is a guy with no powers, but he's still fighting this fight that I'm having trouble with. So it's the dichotomy is just so good to see their inner monologues and see how Superman not only just thinks of Batman, but how he thinks of himself.
Yeah. Well, it comes down to that whole nature versus nurture thing too. Like, how much of it was his Kryptonian sensibilities and Jor-El and all that, or how much of it was Kent's. And like, it's the Kent's. It's him being raised in Kansas. And you see that in whether it's Superman for All Seasons or Superman Red Sun. You see how the Kents were that influence that made him want to make the world a better place and do right by others, and that runs through this book. You know what I mean?
Yeah, specifically in a moment that we'll discuss too, of just of how Kryptonians actually are when they come to Earth without the Kents. So, I mean, with that, let's talk about kind of the key moments from all the issues. Again, this is 12 issues, and what we said before, they're somewhat self-contained on each issue. So there's a couple that are two-parters. There's the through line is Superman trying to do his 12 labors and making the world a better place, so it can handle itself while he's gone.
Yeah,
when he's gone. Well,
when he's gone.
When he's gone. Yeah,
not if, it's a matter of when. Yeah.
In the book introduces new characters like Johnny. Is it Johnny? Jimmy Quantum?
Yeah, the scientist.
The scientist, it was the first trillionaire or something like that. He's the opposite of Lex Luthor
and Elon Musk.
Yeah. He's doing all his science to really help the world instead of selfish reasons, and he just I don't know how he became a trillionaire because of that, but that's c'est la vie, But you start off with that great quick origin of Superman through the panels and the quick words, and really this issue is just kind of bringing us into this world of All-Star Superman, and it ends with Superman revealing its identity to Lois, which that also tells you of where you are in the Superman continuity, as this is a different continuity, because at the time Superman has been married to Lois for years. So how were you feeling about this first issue? Just this first kind of insight.
It's beautiful. The art is beautiful. I do think, like I said, it's just the idea of him, saving these people and confronting Lex, and then, doing all that stuff, and realizing at the end, like, you supercharge your cells a little too much, you're gonna die, because he literally has to save the first man mission to the sun. And by doing so, though, he supercharges his super cells, and basically it's like, well, you gave yourself a death sentence. You got about a year to live or so. So good luck. And he's like, okay, well, I'm going to start checking boxes. Number one, Lois, I love you. Let's pull the shirt open and see what you got here. And I love that in the next issue,
His
she's
shirt
like,
open.
yeah,
His
yeah,
shirt
yeah,
open.
yeah,
Is
yeah,
his
well,
shirt open. Let's be clear. He pulls his shirt open and it shows what he's got here. That was that's a very distinct.
yes, that could have been taken the wrong way. Yes, you are absolutely right. But I love that she is like completely like, you're not, you know what? I've tried to
doesn't
prove
believe
you were Clark Kent for years. You're good. This is a prank. All right. Where's Ashton Kutcher? You know,
You're
where
right.
you know, where is he? You know, and it literally, he has to fly her to the Fortress of Solitude and like, yo, this is where I live. And here's the key to my house. She's like, you leave the key on the ground. Well, it's made of White Dwarf's son. You know, try picking it up. She literally can't pick up this key, you know.
Yeah, or anybody can't.
Well, I love that it comes back and play later on, which I love about that. But yeah, he like takes her on the Fortress of Solitude. He's all, guess what, too? I got a gift for you. And
right. Well, at first, like, because she doesn't know what's going on too. He's kind of a creeper in this way, where he has all her like DNA or info and he has her down, you know, all info without her knowing. So she sees the Kryptonian robots, which I think we see in the trailer too. Like he's trying over
Robot 7 or whatever, the Superman robots.
Yeah, but what is the gift again? It's just a super
serum. This is super serum. That's literally what it is. And he has, and this is again where I had to go back and reread it to see where all these little points came up. But one of his robots, Robot 7, is having a little bit of a malfunction. You get a little inkling of it there, but he's developed this little serum to give to Lois so she can be Superman for a day, basically. Which leads us into the next issue, where she has the costume and she's out there kicking ass and like, this is what you do.
Yeah, and also within these first kind of issues too, you introduced to Lex, and like Superman, we get a lot of different types of Lex Luthors throughout the year. And this one, we're getting the scientist Lex Luthor, not really the businessman Lex Luthor.
No, this is the evil. This is mad scientist Lex Luthor. Yeah,
this is like a mix of the mad scientist, but Gene Hackman Lex Luthor, where he's he's always in jail type of thing. Yeah. But I like the where he's like, I'm sorry, I'm having this conversation 9 minutes ahead, so you have to. And you see the panels later on too of what he's saying and stuff like that. So it's just kind of it's that type of Lex Luthor, and also and that he kind of shows up and comes into play throughout this whole. That puts him into jail. That issue is when they catch him and put him into jail, and then like you said, oh sorry, keep on.
No, go ahead.
I was just gonna move on to the next episode.
Episode.
Why do I keep saying episode? Well,
again, and I think that's again. Well, I know we write it out as like issues, but it's like I said, there is a visual energy to this book. That is a beauty. I mean, we talked about it earlier when we were talking about Quietly, but it's like there is a visual energy to this book that is just it moves so well. You know what I mean? You know, so we talked about widescreen paneling with Brian Hitch a few episodes back. You get a little bit of that, but you also get just like simplified panels. There's nothing extravagant about this. It's very simple, like it kind of back that Silver Age style almost, but like mixed with a modern widescreen sensibility with it. You know, it does. It feels very visual, and I can see why you would say episode as versus to issue. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and with that, each of the stories are self-contained pretty well. And where nowadays, really, you get maybe 3, 4, or 5 different issues is one storyline. And
well, it's because it's all about the trade market now. You know what I mean? It's about getting those trades out, and instead of people buying comics in the store, they're buying them at Barnes and Noble as one big trade, which it's just one issue. And that's also because like comics have moved to much more of a. We'll talk about that later. Anyway, I digress.
So second issue is more of just the day of Lois with Superman's powers.
Yeah, well, she goes out. Well, in the third issue, they run into the good old Chrono heroes, Samson and Atlas, who are just causing problems down in Metropolis. And, they bring the... What's up?
Well, no, I'm just like, okay, Samson and Atlas. And what's funny about this book, too, he's acting like you should know about this. Like, I've seen him... Like, that was that... I think I know comics pretty well. And at that point, I was like, I know who Samson is. I know who Atlas is.
But that's because like Greek mythology or Roman mythology, you know what I mean?
Or it's
even
Bible. the
the
Bible.
Bible, yeah, the
Samson is the
Bible,
Bible. Yeah.
Old Testament, the Old Testament, but Samson and
and
Delilah.
right. And you don't really hear about their chrono adventures in the mythology or the Bible as well. So it's interesting that two interesting people you don't really hear about, as like the strength people. So it's just, but it's put as you should have known. Like this has been through issues all the time.
I mean, like I said, Morrison has written or read almost every DC, so I wouldn't be surprised if they had, in Superman Adventures of Superman 236, this is where this character showed up. Everyone should know that. But I mean, they just write it as if, and it's like, you just as a reader, you're on for the ride. Go on. I love that they're trying to woo Lois during all this. I love what Superman does to them. Just like, I mean, breaks their arms in a freaking arm wrestling contest. Like, cool, sure.
Also, yeah, and it goes to mention too, when Superman got his solar cells kind of overcharged, his powers overcharge as well, where he even develops new powers like that solar net that he makes, or he's stronger than he's ever been.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like Samson and Atlas are kind of finding him at his peak of peaks.
Yeah. Another thing that this book does, when we're talking about the Silver Age, is like in the Silver Age, there was a lot of various kryptonites that Superman would run into. Like, hey, I ran into, I don't know, pink kryptonite. It inverted my guts or something like that. Or like there was like so many weird things. Like, oh, kryptonite would be the thing of the week, in these old stuff. And they introduced black kryptonite in this, which turns Superman crazy aggro and just causing running amok,
Yeah, and this is interesting because this issue this happened was mainly a Jimmy Olsen issue, and that also got into that Silver Age of
Superman's Pal.
Superman's Pal, and then just also how there's Kryptonite of the Week. There's also what wacky thing did Jimmy Olsen run into this week, and they even kind of use that as like a entertainment story, weekend story for the planet. It's like what Jimmy for a day or something like that.
It's like Jimmy for a day. Yeah, it was like his column basically.
Yeah, and it went through all the different stuff that Jimmy Olsen, and it becomes Doomsday for a little bit to fight.
Well, that's probably like the only way they could beat Superman is you have to break glass in case of Doomsday. You know what I mean?
Right.
Or briefly, it's like I'm like, and then there's a Doomsday monster that he's turning into. And I like that. I liked it. Yeah, I like that also Jimmy in this wasn't a complete oaf idiot. Like, he was like very proactive and smart. And I know that Grant Morrison really wanted to write him that way. Yeah. So.
He was a good sidekick. He was somebody who you could tell has been in the trenches or just knows a lot about what's happening with Superman a lot, which was good. And he, throughout the issues too, he kind of knows what's kind of going on. Him and Lois have run into the stuff and know what to do in these situations, which is good. Yeah, I like the OG Willikers. Jimmy Olsen kind of gets old a lot. So
a little bit. It's one note. That's the problem. It's one note. And they have no agency. They depend on. It's like, yes, this Jimmy does still have the super watch to let Superman know trouble's afoot, but he's still proactive, and he's still he's able to like affect change without having to just rely on Superman to save the day.
Yeah, and that watch too, it's just more to the science stuff. He's able to hack stuff. He's able to do a lot more than because it's a Kryptonian watch. It's not just a signal thing.
You'd mentioned the oafishness of Clark Kent earlier on, and this next issue, I think it was issue 5, when Clark rather goes to interview Lex Luthor right before his execution. I love how his oafishness comes into play here. Literally, and there's a scene where Clark walks in. He's like, "Here, I'm here to interview you, Lex," and he like trips over a plug and like knocks everything down, and like Lex gets pissed at him. He's like, "Oh, it's a good thing your oafishness did that, because that plug that you just knocked over was about to electrocute me." Which is ironic that he's actually going to go to the electric chair shortly, and but that's how he uses his oafishness to actually save lives, and you see that time and time again throughout this book, where like he trips over something and it turns out like he ended up putting a fire out like in the process. You know what I mean?
you see in the panel before, you see a little spark from the outlet, and you see Superman or Clark see it.
Yeah.
You see him kind of side eye it, and he knows like you said, he knows what is going to happen. So that domino effects on the next couple panels, and does the whole save thing too. So I like the like I said, the domino effect of it, which was great.
Well, and it goes back to, again, the rereading of it all. When you go back here and go, oh, wait a minute, it was set up in this earlier panel right here. And again, I love the irony of it. Like, Lex is going to the electric chair. He could just have let that happen. He would have been electrocuted. Right. But no, Superman still has to do his job. He still has to save people.
And this issue was very much the Gene Hackman issue for me. Yes. This was Lex Luthor being the Gene Hackman. I'm Lex Luthor. I'm the smartest man in the world. I'm the smartest.
I will be respected for it.
Yeah, and the different little intro, like his what the little robot that has all the library of everything.
The bibliogram or whatever it's called.
Yeah, and that ends up being a whole thing. It has something to do with his escape eventually.
It dug a tunnel underneath, and everyone
using sonic tunneling.
Yeah, it's definitely science criminal Lex. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. And it's a fun one.
It is a fun one. I was going to say, though, the next issue is the one I probably enjoyed the most, and it's the saddest issue.
Good one.
And it's the death of Pa Kent, which, in modern comics, like, Pa's still alive, but they kill him off, and it's very reminiscent of, we brought up earlier the Superman movie where Pa Kent dies, has a heart attack, and to me, it's one of my favorite moments, where it's like Superman literally says all those things I can do, all those powers, and I couldn't even save him. And you have that thing here where, like, Pa Kent is like hiring some new guys to help him with the fields, but he's like telling him, he's like, you know what? I don't know if I've got, and it's framed all as a flashback. That's the other thing, is this is a flashback issue where we're seeing, Clark is getting ready to leave the farm and move off to Metropolis and go to school, go to college, basically. He's like, I don't know if I want to leave. And Paul's like, yeah, you might have to. He's like, well, I'm going to hire some new hands. They're going to help me with the field, even though, Ma wants to go open the general store down in the city. And this, like, Chrono monster arrives, and, like, Superman's, these three guys, you find out that Pa Kent hired are actually three Supermen from the future that are there to stop this thing. And they're like, do not get involved, Superman. We've got this. Trust us. You don't want to get involved. He's like, I have to get involved. And because he gets involved, the 3 minutes he gets, like, basically, I would say it was like time dilation, but he misses the fact that Pa Kent has a heart attack. And he's like, no, I can save him. I can save anybody. And he missed, and he gets there, it's like, I didn't even have a chance to say goodbye.
So many moments in this book that are just not only just heart-wrenching, but just great depictions. And Frank Quitely's art is amazing. Like when when he's sitting there, he's like, wait a second, why don't I hear his heartbeat? And then he's racing to Pa, and then you see he's catching on fire because he's going as fast as he can.
Yeah.
And
what I love is one of the Supermen, though, has this entire face bandaged, and he's from I forget which era he's from. And he's sitting there talking to Pa Kent. Pa Kent's regaling him with, like, yeah, Ma wants to, like I said, go to open a general store. I don't know if I could ever leave the farm. And he turns to him he's like, the boy's going to turn out all right. He's going to be okay, isn't he? And the guy in the bandage just says, yeah, everything's going to turn out all right. And then it comes to be the reveal is this issue isn't a flashback. That's actually Superman who went back in time. And got the chance to say his goodbye that he didn't get when he was younger.
That's such a amazing moment that's done through the craziness of Grant Morrison and so well.
Yeah, because you like I said, you read it, it's like, oh, it's a flashback issue, no big deal. And then you realize, nope, it was never a flashback issue. It was all, it's still from the perspective of a protagonist.
And then even with that, you have the guest appearance, too, of another Superman character that Grant Morrison has made, is the Superman 1 million, which is the head of this whole council.
The 853rd century or something like that?
Yeah, it was the head of this whole Superman council team. And
it was a nice reference to his JLA stuff that he had done with the DC 1 million stuff. It was nice. And even the monsters from that era, I believe, too. Like, or the Solaris is, like, from that era as well. It's a nice little thing. But yeah, it's such a beautiful issue. I really really love that. I don't think that issue gets enough love compared to some of the other moments in the book.
Well, it's also the reminder midway through of just, oh yeah, remember Superman's going to be dying at the end of this. So and it's something that I think like we talked about Man of Steel when they had Pa can't die from a tornado, something that could have been completely saved. He could have been completely saved by Superman, where I think the use of a heart attack, I mean, this is grim, but I think it's the one thing, like we said, that Superman you can't save somebody from that. It's what happened. It's the man who can save everybody can't save you from that.
Well, again, it's that line from the movie, you know, all these things I can do, all those powers, and I couldn't even save them. It's like, yep, you know, you still have to give into time, you know. That all said, we move on from that rather heavy episode, heavy issue.
Yeah,
you got me, into Bizarro Planet. Now, if you know anything about Bizarros,
this is my low point of the All-Star.
This is where I started to dip real bad right here.
This is when stuff is getting for anybody who's new to, you know, Superman lore or anything. Bizarro is the backwards Superman, so of course
am stupid or am smart, you know.
Yeah, and he speaks backwards, and so now you have a whole planet of people speaking backwards, except for the one character. But this is where it's not only is it like high concept where I'm already on a thin ice with that stuff, like following or just keeping up with everything. Then you add Bizarro speak into it from a planet that's underworld that was
the underverse,
the underverse that was made somehow, and then the people were turning into Bizarros. I was just that's where I was really struggling to if I told somebody like this is why you can't really tell somebody you can you can start reading All-Star Superman from anywhere.
Yeah,
this is one of those really hard to jump into for me.
Yeah, it is. This is like you said, I think you're right. It's kind of where I have the same thing. You know, I've never really been a big Bizarro fan. I like them as like I don't know. I don't even know if I mean, they're fine as a characters, but it's when you get all the Bizarros going on, it's like, oh, are they being opposite to themselves? Are they being opposite to what the opposite is saying? And then you add into this the fact that there's a Bizarro. So it's like you a character called Zibaro, who is like, oh, well, he's the smart version of Bizarro in Bizarro World because he's the opposite of the Bizarro. Like, I'm done. I'm done. I'm done.
It's Bizarro by themselves is good. A group of Bizarros is always not something I like. It gets too much. When you have Bizarro's Batman, in some cases, there's been times with Bizarro Justice League.
Yeah,
it's too much.
It's like the Batmites and all that. Like, I can't do the fifth dimension imps. I'm like, no, I'm done here. So let's just get right on past that and say, like, well, this is a thing that's going to happen, and either you might like it or you might not.
Yeah, the only part I did like about that, though, of the part of Zibaro was like, please help me. I'm the only smart person. I'm the only person. I'm the only smart person here. It's like, please get me out somehow. And Sabrina's like, I can't. Sorry. Like,
I think he was the stand-in for the audience.
Yeah, please get me out of these two issues. It was two issues too. That's the thing too. It was two issues. That was two issues too many.
Well, the other thing too is like you see all the Bizarro stuff kind of throughout the book. Oh, Bizarro clones are helping, and then it's like, oh, now Bizarros are enemies. I'm like, wait, what? And they're like, it's the logic of Bizarro is just kind of like whatever it needs to be, and as long as it's opposite, you know, and dumb, you know, I'm like, that's fine, I guess, whatever. But speaking of not dumb, who does arrive in the next issue is a pair of Kryptonian astronauts, and boy, howdy, do they cause problems.
How is it every time too with Kryptonians? Like it's probably because of just how the society is, but you don't normally see anytime there's like you have those two astronauts, you have Zod, they're all the people in the Phantom Zone. So this was like the one chance too where you have somebody that's not coming out of prison.
Yeah.
breaking out of prison to be on Earth, and
Yep.
it's just like, it hurts. Not it hurts, but it's just disappointing a little bit. And you're
Yep.
well, it just reminded me of the this is going to be a little bit of tangent, but Ultimate Fantastic Four. We've talked about this a little bit when he meets an Nihilus,
Yeah.
and Mr. Fantastic is just like, why can't you just be nice? Like, why do we always have to fight? Why do aliens always have to be like these bad guys? Why can't you just be like a regular alien? That's how I always felt like with these Kryptonians. It's like, why can't you be nice?
Because
What's going on?
Because they're arrogant. I mean, it's funny. The recent arc of Action Comics that was basically Superman trying to fix the Phantom Zone and his legacy attached to it because of his father creating the Phantom Zone. And it also involves him going back to Krypton before the destruction of Krypton. You find it's just like Kryptonians are arrogant asses. That's just the plain and straight. They think they know everything. They think they're the smartest thing on the but they're so arrogant they wouldn't even believe that their own world was destroying itself. That's the thing you got to get back to the core. Is they are so arrogant. They're like, their shit don't stink. You know what I mean? And these guys are these two astronauts are the same. Was like, why would you be mingling with these monkeys? You know what I mean? Like, we should be taking over this planet. And Superman's like, yo, like, we should not be doing that. And again, that comes back to the nature versus nurture. Him being raised by the Kents, made him see that all life is valuable. And of course, in their own arrogance and stupidity, they forget to realize that they've been infected with Kryptonian radiation as they've flown through the air, which is such a, like, I will say that's one thing I didn't like about this issue, because that ending kind of comes out of nowhere. Like, it's like this great fight. And then also, oh, I'm sick. I'm like, what the hell? You're sick?
Yeah.
Oh, we got Kryptonian poison. Where? Oh, from the flight? It was such a kind of wrap it up. We have like one page left to wrap this whole thing up. Because up to that point, I was like, this is really fascinating. Like, I love the fact that they're like, he shows up at the Fortress of Salt. He's like, what did you do to my house? And they're like, you left the key on the floor, pal. What did you expect us to do?
And then you've seen them trying to meld Metropolis to be more like Krypton too, the different structures.
I love that they just willy-nilly break the moon in half, and then to repair it, they just rip bridges out and use them as stitches.
Oh, yeah, like easy, done. Okay, next. And then the arrogance, and what I didn't like you said, was the whole Kryptonian sickness, because this is Morrison has been doing all these high concept things, these high concept ideas, and creative ways, and they just like kryptonite is a crutch that is used a little bit too much with Superman. And I was just a little bit disappointed how that was used as a crutch, in a way of just to depower them, or
it depowered him. He throws him in the Phantom Zone, and they're like, oh my gosh, we can't believe you saved us, even though we we're so mean to you. So yes, because I was raised by humans.
Because I'm not a jerk. I'm Superman. This S means hope.
Yeah, exactly. It's funny because the next issue is more of a non-linear day in the life of Superman. And this is probably the other big famous panel is in this issue. You basically just see Superman going about his day as he's trying to sequence his DNA, as he's trying to save people, stop trains from going amok. And again, this is one of those things where there's a little setup, and at least one of the famous pages where you see a psychologist no, I'm gonna be there. There was a train accident, which you see Superman stopping. I couldn't get there. Just stay. Cut to a few pages later, you see a jumper on a roof, and they throw their phone off, and they're getting ready to jump, and Superman grabs them and is like, no, the train really did. They were on their way. People care. I remember the exact phrasing is.
Yeah, he kind of goes like, hey, your therapist was really running late. It's kind of my fault. I'm sorry, or just something to that effect, like we were saying.
I think I have it right here real quick. Because you know what? If we're going to do it the right way.
Right.
Yeah, they're about to jump. Your doctor really did get held up, Regan. It's never as bad as it seems. You're much stronger than you think. Trust me. And then he hugs them.
Yeah, and that's Superman to a T. That's where Batman would have just pulled him off the ledge, where Superman not only saves but gives hope. And that's the whole thing.
He heard the psychologist on the phone screaming no, don't go, and flew around until he found that person before they jumped and saved them and hugged them and walked them off the ledge. And it kind of gets to the core. It's interesting to me. That's kind of gets to the core of Superman. It's they hear everything.
Yeah.
So that means they had to actively choose, I can't save everything. You know what I mean? Like, I have to pick and choose. It's literally, so what was I think how's Superman best described? He's the man who can do anything, but can't do everything, you know?
Yeah. Oh, that's really good.
Yeah.
And the flip of the coin of that is what made Irredeemable,
Yep.
that Mark Waid Irredeemable, so
Yep.
good. Is where you can't even mention his name anywhere because they'll hear and then come at you. So
Block you.
yeah, and so just that whole concept of a super hearing, which is used but not really used in a sense. Like people,
Well, it even said, like, Superman could just be flying around saving people left and right, just as a blur. Like, I think you see a version of that in Astro City, the Samaritan issue, where he's flying around like a blur. And they talk about the reason that he has to make that decision not to do that because it'd be a drop in the bucket against just the insanity that is the world. But the other thing too is it's like if he was to do that, he would lose his humanity. And that's where I think Irredeemable comes into play. If you ever do read that book, but I think he has to choose. I have to be human. I have to interact with people. Yes, I have a responsibility to save as many as I can, but I can't. At a certain point, I have to just I have to let life be life. I have to let things happen. You know what I mean? I can't be a god.
yeah, also
Yeah.
and he literally can't be at two places at once. He can play
Yeah,
at
you
as
got
many
literally.
places as he can, but he can't be at two places at once.
Yeah.
And also, I mean, no matter how Superman wants to, he'd get too tired and would be make mistakes, and then it would be more deaths will be on his hands.
Yeah.
It's that type of. You have to.
Yeah.
This got hopefully this doesn't sound horrible, but he has to have that little bit of work-life balance.
Yeah, it does. It's exactly that, though. And like I said, he needs to have his ties to humanity, or he loses his humanity, which is ironic. It's so, they call himself human. I mean, he's a Kryptonian technically, but it is that. And it's that humanity that makes him, it's like, what did it's like, Kryptonite, it was like the Kryptonian, the name is superhuman, but Pa Kent made him a hero. I don't know. It's just interesting. You know what I mean? Like, anyway, I digress. There's another panel in this issue I love that he creates a pocket universe to see what life would be like on Earth if he doesn't live, to see if like Earth could still make it. And I love that it's basically our world, and you see a panel of it's implied that it's Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster, the guys who created Superman, and it's them like, third time's the charm, because they tried 3 different times to make Superman, like third time's the charm, and it's them making the Superman. It's like, oh, in this world, our world, they were able to survive without me. This world will be okay,
Yeah, I think that's a little bit for me a little bit too much. Like Superman is now is a guy we just said can't be a god becoming a god.
Yeah.
And so it kind of changes that continuity of Earth Prime and Earth Q and
but this is a separate continuity. It's a whole
Yeah.
separate continuity in and of itself.
But
So I'm fine with it.
I think that was just for me. That was just a little bit too much. Like, I guess the Superman's smart and everything, but creating like a whole universe within a square, it was kind of. It's like, oh, I mean, he's smart, but come on, man. Like,
it was fine. It's that Silver Age weirdness, so I was good with it.
Yeah,
that's exactly what I think.
Yeah, that was just for me a little bit.
You clearly took issue with it.
Oh boy.
Yeah, we did it.
We're firing on all cylinders on that one.
So as we come into the end of the book, Lex has escaped prison. He's gotten his hands on the super serum, and he now has the powers of Superman for this last issue.
Yeah, and speaking of like Lex Luthor just kind of breaking out or whatever, what's the deal with this whole 18-year-old like weird
niece?
Is his niece?
Yeah.
He's like, how's your mom? And she still hates you. And it's like,
wasn't like you said the Gene Hackman version of the movie that was like his nephew? So I think it's just a take on that.
Yeah, it's true. It's kind of like, again, it's a little part. So it's just like Grant Morrison being Grant Morrison.
Yeah.
And well, I like though when Superman's kind of preparing for this whole fighting with Lex stuff, he's going through the Fortress of Solitude, and you see he walks by the Phantom Zone projector and you see the astronauts. It seems like it kind of looks like they're fighting or just trying to wrangle the Phantom Zone, because the Phantom Zone the prisoners, because you see them like flying through, and you can clearly see they're in that same costume, and you see the guys in front of the projector, and they have like these scared looks on their faces and stuff. I don't know if they're just trying to get out. That's all. But to me, it was like they're in the middle of like finding like help us out because these astronauts are whooping our butts type of
That's
thing.
hilarious.
So it's kind of like a good little callback.
I was gonna say, speaking of callbacks, one of the things that kind of drove me nuts about this issue, like, when the hell did Lex get his hands on the super serum? And you have to like go through and parse where it happens, and you find out in issue 2 that Robot 7, who was developing the super serum, had a malfunction. You even in Eric Clark, Superman clocks that. And then in like, I think it's like issue 10, when they're fighting Solaris, you find out that it infected and was able to, like, you hear Robot 7 say something effective. It's like, was infected by the Solaris thing, downloaded things, gave the serum away. I'm so sorry. Please forgive me before it like dies. And the implication is, again, like, this is what you get on the reread, is that, yeah, like, Solaris infected the robot, and the robot gave that serum to Lex, basically, somehow. And it's like, but again, it's like, if you don't read it, you're like, wait a minute, how did he get his hands on this? And why does he have the powers of Superman now? How did he get his hands on that? It's like, again, this is where, again, it warrants the reread. And it's like, you have to read each panel. You can't skip panels. You can't skip word bubbles. You've got to see where everything is almost a clue in a weird way, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And
I don't know if I necessarily, I was gonna say, I don't know if I necessarily like having to do that every single time for every single comic I read, but I appreciate it when it's done well. But having to reread issues sometimes, this can be a bit much. You know what I mean?
Thank God it's 12 issues. Let's just say that. Thank God it's only 12 issues.
Well, his Batman run is like, what, 7 years long?
Which Batman run?
The Batman run that Grant Morrison did. It's like 7 years long. And it ends with Final Crisis and the death of Batman. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Sorry, I was getting it mixed up with the Batman and Robin run.
No. I mean, it's like full
that's
on.
why I got mixed up.
The full on Batman run was. And so it's like one of those things where, yep, you can't really skip out. Like, everything kind of. It's like, I don't know if I have that in me to do that again.
Hey, with Ninja Bats and Damien, that's all we can say about, like, in one issue. But so then from that last kind of panel, or not the last panel, but just in that issue, Lex just kind of, when he stops the bullet with his hand, he kind of like, oh crap, now he has the Superman powers. Now you have the full fight of basically this Superman at this time too is struggling.
Yes.
He is struggling physically and just kind of, not mentally, but he has so many hands and so many different pies at this time as well. Like, he has the mini Kryptonians of Kandor trying to help him. He has this universe that he just made all of a sudden too, and then he's trying to do his memoir, or his last will and testament, basically. And then all of a sudden, here's Lex Luthor with the powers of Superman popping up, and so he's struggling just to get through the day.
Yeah. I do like, though, that when Lex, using the powers, finally uses the super hearing and hears everything that Superman hears, and he's like, how do you do this? And he basically has like not a panic attack, but he's just like, how can you do this? You hear everything. He has that universal moment of truth, like, oh my God. And that's what ultimately defeats him. You know what I mean? It was like, when he's like given the powers of Superman, he can't handle it. It's just too much. And it kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier about like the super hearing of Superman, where like Superman hears it all and he has to choose not to do these things, or he has to choose to do these things. And it's too much for Lex. You know what I mean?
And the visual spectrum too. He sees all this.
He's like, he sees the truth of reality. He's like, and like, he's like, yeah, you could have been a better person, Lex. You didn't want to save the world. You just wanted credit for doing it, basically. You know?
And it's, even though how smart Superman is, this is Lex Luthor with all this stuff at his disposal too, which, even though Superman is known as, I guess he's creating all these universes, Lex Luthor it's smarter than him.
Yeah. On an intellectual level, I would say that.
Yeah. So, I mean, with all these powers and stuff too, he's just on a whole other perspective. And in like what somebody said, was it his niece or somebody, Jimmy or Lois, was like, what happened to him? And Superman's just like, he just realized that his time is up, type of thing.
Yeah.
Which, great.
Yeah. Of course, the issue ends with Superman flying off into the sun because the sun's falling apart and he's going to go reignite the sun, and there's a little more to it. Obviously, there's a lot of things we left out when we talked about it. It ends with him doing his duty and,
it great panel of him. The old
the
school
machine panel.
Machine panel.
Yeah.
Yeah, we left out really what Solaris was, the Sun Eater.
There's Jimmy Olsen that has a lot of bigger presence. Perry, Lois is a huge presence in the book. But that being said, I know we had to kind of get through a lot to get through, but what were your kind of overall thoughts? Have you reread it? Good, bad, the what? What do you think?
Yeah, no, overall, this is a great Superman book, like just how everybody is saying. And I'm a big Superman fan. Like a lot of people go towards lean towards Batman. I've always kind of leaned towards Superman.
Batman's cooler. Batman is cooler.
Yeah. But I always liked Superman just
better.
He's that beacon of hope, and that's what this book is. And then when he's done well, he's done very well. And he's just a fun book. And I overall, I liked it. It had some of its low parts, but the highs outweighed the lows.
Do you think, what I'm kind of getting at is is this a book, if you're a non-reader of Superman or you're one who looking, do you pick this book up, or is this this is not the place to start? Does it require reading?
I don't think it requires, like we said with the All-Star thing, it's not bogged down by the continuity. Everybody knows the basic story of Superman. If you know the basic story of Superman, you can pick this up from book one, I believe.
With all the weirdness in it, to all the Grant Morrison of it all, that's kind of where I'm also getting at too. Is do you think the Grant Morrison of it all makes it accessible? Because that's the thing, is ultimately at the end of the day, how accessible is this book? Is it a good jumping on point?
Yeah, I mean, it's accessible in the case of new Superman readers or just new continuity. It's a new mini series. It's also just 12 issues. It's not very long. But it is a read. It's a heavy read. So it's really how your fandom is. It's more Star Trek than Star Wars.
Yes.
It's more it's more, so I would even say more what deep in what Babylon 5 Star, what I mean? It's more obscure sci-fi. So
it's
if you're
reference.
Right.
JMS.
So so that's what I mean. It's how obscure or how your mind works with sci-fi, I guess. If you're a big sci-fi reader, a general sci-fi person, you gravitate towards those, this is great. If you're more casual and more for action, you'll get lost. I did. I'm not saying, sorry, I shouldn't say you'll get lost. I got lost. And so you might have to reread some stuff, kind of do the whole cork board, the Pepe Sylvia type of thing. But it's
got box of the Pepe.
Right. Yeah. But it's overall though, it's still a fun book. I say this every episode too. I should say,
but that's the point.
I would say fun book. Yeah.
Well, eventually we'll start doing some bad books that are held in high regard, or bad books that are held in low regard. I don't care, but we're not going to tackle crap right now. At least if we're trying to build an audience.
I'm trying to build an audience. I want people to listen. I gotta get those clicks, baby.
Wait a minute, you're gonna do the Trouble miniseries?
No,
which I actually want to do with the Trouble miniseries.
I don't know if I can. No.
Yeah,
anything Steve Dillon.
It wasn't Steve Dillon. Trouble was
I'm saying.
Oh, I see.
I'm saying.
How dare you?
Or anything.
How dare you? How dare you? Because Preacher, I will go to bat with you on that one.
That's true. Yeah,
I like his Punisher too. That all said, I do think when I had mentioned earlier, when I first reread this for this podcast, I read it a week or two ago, and things got delayed because of looking out the window, all the wildfires, everything, all that. And so we had to delay the episode, and I was going to go into it. I was like, I kind of texted you. I was like, dude, I can't do this yet. My brain is just not liking this. And I didn't feel like I could articulate why I did not like the reread of it. But then as I started writing out the draft of the script, and then Cohen, I got to go back and research this. Why? And then I started rereading it. I was like, no, wait, I'm now getting it. Like the second reread, like it all clicked into place for me. That said, like I do think there's some real weak moments. I think the Bizarro stuff you can like pitch, the Kryptonian stuff I liked up until the end. I felt it was very like Deus Ex Machina. It was like it just kind of wrapped itself up in the the last page. I do think that this is probably not the best jumping on point for new readers. I think there's plenty of other books that have like more accessible storytelling for like a new Superman story. That said, if you are familiar with Superman and you want something, you're like, I want to read this and then kind of get into it again, this is the perfect place to jump on. It is I love Frank Quitely. So, that's the other thing too, is if you look at the art and like, I don't like this art, you're like, stay away, because that's all this is going to be for 12 issues. I do think that it's a quick read, ironically enough, to your point. Like, I actually do think it was, because I read through this a lot quicker than I expected to, because it is so visual, but it did force me to go back and reread it a second time. So I don't know if that's actually quicker or not. But like the first read,
that kind of goes into it.
Yeah, it's like the first read through, I was like, oh, I burned through it. And I'm like, oh, let me go reread. I'm like, oh, now I got to really go panel by panel or frame by frame or word bubble by word bubble to kind of dig out those like, oh, that's where he got that, or that's where this person did this or whatever. So it's not an easy read, to your point, but I do think it is a quick read, if that makes sense.
I think for me, it seems like a quick read, but if I'm going back, like if I'm going through, I'm like, huh? What? And I have to go back to understand what was going on. It just, that makes the quickness kind of slow down for me.
Sure. And you should slow down. So there's certain books that you can do that. You just flip. I got it. Boom, done. But you have to read this issue. You don't get, or these issues. You don't get to just like burn through them.
And we're not saying it's like dense like a Bendis or a Claremont.
No, it's not at all. It's
no.
That's what I'm saying. It's
that's what I mean.
Yeah.
But it's that the
every word counts.
Everything. Every word does count.
That's what
the
it
thing.
Yeah. And that's why I kind of said earlier. It's like Grant Morrison is required reading that requires rereading.
Which is a hit or miss.
We
say
absolutely.
It really depends. Hopefully, you can get the compendium to the compendium.
So with that said, I think it's one of those things where I want to say like this is like an A book, but it is like an A-, because I do think the Bizarro stuff, I really would have kicked that out. But overall, there is such great moments. Like I said, the Pa Kent issues really hits home for me, and it was so well done. There's so many good things like the paneling, the origin paneling, the just the various elements that kind of come up. What would you say, like A-, A? Where would you put this on?
Yeah, I think it's the A- region. Like we said earlier, the highs outweigh the lows. And speaking of just the art and the painting, the coloring on this is gorgeous. Amazing. It's so nice to see. The different colors.
Yeah. It is. It's very chromatic, if that makes any sense. You know what I mean? Like it's like like when you see like the light come through a window and you like almost kind of creates that rainbow effect. That's what that book this is what that book feels like. I mean, there's that great cover of Superman just sitting on a cloud looking over the sky. I just love that shot, that Frank Quitely does. But
which we used as a teaser image. So it was great.
It's great. It's great. It's good. It's good shot. So for people who either don't want to read this or have already read this or are looking for more Superman or looking for more accessible Superman, what books can we recommend? We got quite a few, but let's see what we got here.
So let's get the one that's not Superman out up front right out of the way. Just a direct kind of, if you like this team, you like this writing, I would say we go into We 3, which is Morrison and Quitely. It's animals in a robotic suits that were designed and bred to be weapons
for the militaries.
Yeah, and just them trying to escape and get away and stuff. It has heart string moments. It's it's Homeward Bound but crazy.
Yeah, that's a great way. It's Homeward Bound meets the Terminator.
Yeah,
it's crazy. It's a good book. It's a really good book. Obviously the follow-up to this would be like the New 52 Action Comics that Grant Morrison did with, I think it was Rags Morales, and I think Gene Ha did a few issues here and there. It's the Bruce Springsteen version of Superman, is I think the way he described it. Him in blue jeans and a t-shirt and a cape. It was some of the ideas that were left over from the Superman 2000 or the Superman Now that kind of spawned All Star. It's not the same chronology at all, but it's a lot of the same themes kind of run through a young Superman in his early days. But I do think if you're moving away from Grant Morrison, I do think a book to look at is a book by Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale called Superman for All Seasons. And it's just, again, it's that awe. It's got the clumsy, bulky linebacker Superman art, but it's like this from the perspective of Pa Kent or Lois Lane as they see Superman grow throughout the season. It starts off in spring and then summer and then fall. And it's like spring is like when he's still in Smallville, and then when he moves to Metropolis, and then so on and so forth. It's just a beautifully well done book, and I think it was when Jeff Loeb was really at the top of his game.
This was during the whole Long Halloween.
Yeah, it was post Spider-Man. I think it was like the first book he did post. Yeah, it was like in between those two books. Yeah,
yeah.
It's absolutely gorgeous. And I really recommend it. Jeff Loeb is, again, he's another writer, hit or miss, but this is when he hits. Tim Sale hits in this book.
And then with that, another great Superman story is Superman Birthright with Mark Waid. And
my boy.
I always say his name wrong, Francis Liu.
Linnell Francis Yu.
The Francis Yu, yeah. And that's a great, not Superman origin story, but it's the time where Superman is getting into Metropolis and becoming known as Superman, and it has
it's
a
like
lot
Superman year one, essentially.
And it's
almost
a lot of fun concepts of just how he sees people's aura or spectrum and things like that. And it's a really good Superman book.
And art is gorgeous. It's essentially the next. It's considered part of his kind of origin. You know what I mean? Not one of those ones that, well, we did an origin and then we threw it away. It's like it's still kind of been the status quo of the origin.
Which I would not be surprised if we see some of that in James Gunn stuff too. It's uplifting. Also, any good Superman story is an uplifting.
It should be at least. Speaking of the opposite of uplifting, we had mentioned the book Irredeemable, which is what if Superman turned evil, which is also by the same writer Mark Waid. And it is a brutal story of if Superman went evil, we'd be fucked with a capital F.
He's scarier than Homelander. Let's just say that. It's just everybody they have a whole thing where you can't even mention his name, because if you do, he'll come and find you and kill you. It's nuts. It's a great follow up to this too, if you want a crazy Superman. And
there's a couple other tangential titles that tie into that. There's like or was it Incorruptible, which is like what if a villain became a hero in the same universe and all that too. But you'd also written down Superman Rebirth.
Yeah, Superman Rebirth is a great. I'm just kind of spouting out like good Superman stories, because if you like this, you're gonna like other ones. Yeah. So Superman Rebirth. It was the whole Rebirth line that came after the 52, and it introduced Daddy Superman.
Well, reintroduced the Clark Kent from Post Crisis back into, which, and I know there's a lot of words. I apologize.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, post pre Crisis, in Crisis 52, but really the main word would bring it is Daddy, because it brought in Daddy Superman, introduced and created John Kent, and the Superman home life in Smallville, and him bring up in a family into so many great moments. Like they go to the Dinosaur Island, and that stuff with Eradicator and things like that, and you get Lois being a badass
too.
Yeah,
it was Pete Tomasi and Dan Jurgens were doing non-writing duties, and I believe it was Patrick Gleason was doing the art for a lot of those issues. It was absolutely gorgeous, and it was a lot of fun. That's like you said. That's where you introduce the Super Sons, where it's Damian and John is prepubescent boys as superheroes, and it's too bad that, well, again, because Bendis, we had to change Jonathan Kent to a teenager when there was such a dynamic that could have been fleshed out there. And I love not just the dynamic between him and Damian, but I love the dynamic between John and Superman being a father. You know what I mean? And like
being a family man.
Being a family, I absolutely loved
it. How do you become the mix of Jor-El and Pa Kent? And that's what Superman is trying to be Superman.
Yeah,
and teaching teaching this boy life and death, and just how to be responsible.
Yep. Real quick, last one I'll mention is the first issue of Astro City, which is the issue about the Samaritan, who is essentially a Superman analog. And it's that thing of like, he is using every second of his time to save people. And like, it's just an interesting take on Superman mythology. Yeah, if you take a look at it. You have one last recommendation though.
Yeah. My last recommendation, if books ain't your thing, which if it isn't, I don't know why you're listening to this. But if you've had enough reading for the day, definitely check out the Superman animated series. It's on Max. You can get the Blu-rays wherever you want. It's by the same exact team that did Batman the Animated Series. It's very much like a lot of the Silver Age storylines, and it actually gives you kind of a good insight of Superman and all his villains and just other stories that you can have. And I mean, the voice acting, the animation, the stories, everything is just top notch, and it helps you kind of move on from that. So you can move on to the Batman anime series and then to the Justice League and stuff like that. But this is a great Superman show. It's like 4 or 5 seasons, or 4 or 5 volumes, and introduces a lot of other characters too within it. And it's just a great show. I mean, I would love to do an episode of just all the Timverse.
Yeah, we eventually will. Don't worry.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Turns out there's a finite amount of comics. We're going to run them out soon. We're going to run out soon, Josh.
Oh, clutching my pearls. No way.
The pearls that Bruce. Oh, sorry.
No. Martha, say that name. Yeah. So again, overall, Brian, this is a great book.
Yeah.
Definitely would recommend it to somebody who wants to get into Superman more. Or somebody who's it's not something to jump off to, but it's somebody who wants to get a little bit more of an idea of.
Yeah, like I said, I think they're using the vibe of this Superman to like channel the movie. I think you'll see a few specific panels that are going to kind of come into play, but I think overall if you're looking for like what is the vibe of the Superman going to be in the movie, that's what you're looking for in this book. Don't expect like a 1-to-1. That's not going to happen. You know what I mean? I do think that, it's not necessarily the best jumping off point. That's me personally. I think there's other books to do that, but it's still a hell of a read.
What other stuff have you been reading other than this Superman All-Star?
Man, I got to tell you, I'll make this quick, but DC is absolutely killing it lately. I'm sorry, Marvel. I'm a Marvel kid, but man, DC is killing. In fact, they've been killing it so well. They've taken a big sharehold from Marvel. It's interesting. Like, and it has to do a lot with the compact volumes they're putting out. Those $10 compact volumes that they're doing. Plus, the Absolute line has been absolutely killing it for them. That said,
get it?
The All In initiative, I think, has really been good. For the most part, I'd say that's mostly hits rather than misses. And I'm going to talk about 3 books over there right now, which is Detective Comics. Tom Taylor was over on Nightwing. He is now doing Detective Comics with Batman and artist Michael Janin, I believe his name is. Great book. And it kind of is like it's like kind of like a mix of modern day with throwback to Batman's past when he's becoming Batman. The next book is another book called Batman Dark Patterns, which is Dan Waters and Hayden Sherman. They're doing a 12-issue miniseries. And again, it's kind of like in the early days of Batman, solving like these kind of ground level mysteries. Beautiful art, worth checking out. And then finally, speaking of early years, in fact, all these have an early years thing. There's another 12-issue miniseries, Batman and Robin Year One by Mark Waid and Chris Samney. Just great art, great storytelling for all the fans of like the Mark Waid Daredevil run or his Black Widow run with Samney. Must check it out. Have to do it. And for you, my friend.
Awesome. Yeah, I only have 2 that just want to recommend. Is I got into the start of Sabretooth, The Dead Don't Talk, which is I like Sabretooth. It's kind of one of my guilty pleasure bad guys.
That's no problem.
Whenever he shows up, or I read the Krakoa series that they had, but this one is a fun one because it kind of delves more into the history of Marvel and just way back when, because you have this first issue, you see ancestors of Clint Barton, you see an ancestor of Fisk, and you kind of delve into really the past of Sabretooth at the time. which is kind of fun. It's like in a weird, it's like
10 or something like that.
Yeah, the early 1900s,
Okay.
New York and stuff. It's the writer is Frank Thierry, and it's drawn by Michael Stamaria. And that's fun. And the cover art's Adam Kubert, who I'm always gonna like. And then my other one is the New Gods. The New Gods.
Excellent book.
Yeah, it's
Rom V
first
doing
of all, it's Rom V, and his art is done by Jorge Fornes and Evan Cagle, which I hope I said that right.
Especially your research comment earlier.
I know, right? Right. Well, some of us did the research, some of us did not. But I always like the New Gods too. It's always been one of those cosmic kind of underappreciated type of Jack Kirby stuff, I think. Other than Dark Side, I mean, you don't really know much about the New Gods, and I love the concept of being a new god, and basically it's going to be popping up, and Orion is down there, and he's talking to Mr. Miracle, and he's like, "There's a new god coming. I have been ordered to eliminate it, to kill it. Now you have to save him from me. Like I'm asking you, like, to escape me.
It's like, I'm giving you an 8-day head start, and then I'm coming full force."
Right. And it's like the greatest escape artist. You have to escape myself.
The greatest warrior.
Yeah, which is a great concept. And the new one should be coming out like the week that we bring this out. So I mean, I can't. It's one of those where I couldn't wait for the next issue. And
that first issue kicked it off great. I absolutely love that first issue.
Yeah, so those are my kind of two recommendations.
It's great books. All right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, on that note, thank you again. For all you out there who are listening, please be sure to like, subscribe, give us a 5-star rating, recommend us to your friends. Even if you don't recommend us, tell us, give us a 5-star rating anyway. Put us on play, put us on mute, just give us the links, give us the hint, clicks, all that stuff.
We're not begging, but
please listen. Please.
And we are on YouTube now.
Oh, we are. That's right. I got us on YouTube finally. It's a podcast. It's still audio. It's not it's not as video, but we we're on YouTube, we're on Spotify, we're on Apple iTunes or Apple Podcasts. Be sure to follow us on the SoundCloud. And then SoundCloud. Be sure to follow us on the Twitters or the Blue Skies, the Instagrams. It's either We Got Issues or We Got Issues Cast or the BComp. We're somewhere around there. Well, you'll find us.
Yeah.
We actually may have a special guest from the old G4 days. And I mean, the old G4 days may be making an appearance soon, hopefully in the coming months. So reach out to them.
That's a teaser.
I'm not going to say who it is, but comic fans will appreciate. And if you have anything you want to talk to us about, let us know.
Please. We're always open to suggestions of what you want us to cover. If you would like to hear our opinion on something, I mean, we are kind of the authority on different comic. No, we're not. No, we're not. Not even close. But it's if you just want us to do a deep dive or have our
take on something,
our take on stuff, and us to look at some, please send us a message on our socials,
or just. If you run into me in person and want to ask, which is what happened for All-Star.
Yeah. And if you run into me in person and you ask me, hey, what about this character? The first thing I'll tell you is, how dare you speak to me? So,
well, speaking of, who are we doing next episode?
So this is going to be a little bit different than what we have been doing. We've been kind of going over different storylines mainly, or different books. And this one, we're going to actually do a character deep dive because of another movie entity coming up, and that is good old Thunderbolt Ross Red Hulk.
Sounds good to me. Not really. No, I'm joking. I'm fine with doing Red Hulk.
No. It's definitely a rebel.
I'll have some issues.
Yes, we will. Remember what we talked about? Maybe some stuff that we don't like more. Some of that stuff will be popping up, so it's going to be more of just a deep dive in Red Hulk because of the new Captain America stuff and Harrison Ford of it all. So,
all right.
Well, thank you again for everybody for listening. We will see you next time.
Peace.